Your thermostat reads 72. The air 4 feet under the floor you're standing on reads 80. Not degrees, percent. 80% relative humidity, in the dark, under the chair you sit in every evening. And in most of the eastern half of this country, it's been sitting there since the first week of June. I've put a meter under 11 houses in this county. 9 of them read over 75% in August. 2 of them read 88. None of those homeowners knew. Every one of them had a symptom they'd already explained to themselves some other way. My name is Hollis Ward. I'm 63 years old. I've lived on the same 40 acres of chert and red clay in the Missouri Ozarks since 1979, in a house my wife's grandfather framed in 1954. I hung drywall and set joists for 18 years before my knees quit on me, and I've been under more houses in this county than the man who reads the gas meters. Now, before I go any further, I'm going to tell you who this video isn't for. I'd rather lose you in the first 2 minutes than waste your Saturday. If your house sits on a concrete slab, this doesn't apply to you. If you have a full finished basement with a dehumidifier running, this mostly doesn't apply to you. And if you live out west, Arizona, eastern Colorado, the high desert, where the summer dew point sits in the 40s, your foundation vents are doing exactly what somebody hoped they'd do, and you should leave them alone. What I'm describing belongs to one specific kind of house in one specific kind of air. A wood floor over a vented crawl space in a place where the summer is wet. That's Missouri. That's Arkansas, Tennessee, the Carolinas, Ohio, Virginia, most of the Gulf. If that's your house, stay with me. Stay all the way to the end. You'll know exactly which number to measure, what the meter costs, where to hang it, what each reading means, and why the rule that created this whole mess was written in January of 1942 by men who had no research in front of them at all. You've seen this. You just filed it under something else. The front door swells shut in August and swings free in February. The hardwood in the kitchen is cupped. Run your palm across it and the edges of each board sit higher than the middle, like a row of shallow gutters. There's a smell in the hall closet, and it's strongest down low, near the floor register. Your allergies are worse inside the house than out in the hayfield, which makes no sense to you, and your doctor doesn't have much to say about it either. And there's a soft place in the floor by the bathroom. You step around it now without thinking about it. Here's the one that tells me the most. Go look under your house with a flashlight. If the fiberglass insulation is hanging out of the joist bays, falling down in gray sheets, or laying on the dirt in wet piles, that is not a squirrel and it is not bad stapling. Wet fiberglass gets heavy. It holds water like a sponge, gains weight, and pulls itself out of the bay. I've crawled under houses where 200 square feet of it was laying face down in the mud, and the homeowner blamed the installer from 1998. None of those are separate problems. They're one problem, wearing 5 different shirts. Here's the part that changes how you think about the whole thing. That air doesn't stay down there. There's a thing called the stack effect. Simple idea. Warm air in your house rises and leaks out the top, the attic hatch, the light fixtures, the chimney chase. And when air leaves the top of a house, something has to replace it from the bottom. A chimney doesn't just push at the top, it pulls at the bottom. Your house is a chimney, and the crawl space is the bottom of it. So air comes up, through every gap around a drain pipe, every seam in the subfloor, every hole a plumber cut and never sealed. Building researchers have measured this movement for 40 years, and it's been documented since at least 1985, when work on radon in houses showed crawl space air moving up into the living space in real, measurable volume, carrying whatever the crawl space happened to have in it. Whatever is growing on the underside of your floor, you are breathing. Not metaphorically, not eventually. Tonight, in your bed, with the windows closed. That's why the allergies are worse inside. You don't have a foundation problem. You have a lung problem that happens to live under your floor. So the natural answer is, it's damp. So let's air it out. Open more vents. Cut in 2 more. Buy the powered vent fan at the farm store, the one with the thermostat and the little humidistat dial, and blow that damp air out of there. I did that. In 1994, on my own house. 2 more vents on the south wall and a fan I paid $61 for. It got worse. Measurably worse. The joists over my kitchen went from damp to dripping by the 3rd week of July. Because of what you're actually doing when you open a vent in Missouri in July. You're not removing water. You are pumping in the wettest air within 100 miles and running it across the coldest surfaces in your entire house. Every cubic foot of that air is carrying water, and it's about to be forced to let go of it. This isn't a fringe opinion. The American Society of Home Inspectors published a piece on crawlspace ventilation, making the same point. And the author noted plainly that he could find no documentation explaining how the ventilation rules were developed and no evidence-based support for them. That's a professional inspectors association saying, in print, that nobody can find the research, because there wasn't any. Here's the history, and it's shorter and dumber than you'd expect. Before about 1930, most houses around here sat up on stone or brick piers, open on all four sides. Air moved under them the way air moves under a barn, and the dirt underneath dried the same way the yard dried. There was no crawl space because there was no enclosure. Then, in the 30s and 40s, builders started running a continuous foundation wall all the way around. Better insulation, better heating, cheaper to build, warmer floors. But now you'd boxed in a room of dirt with no way for anything to move. So somebody said, put holes in the wall. In 1939, the U.S. Forest Products Laboratory published a bulletin called Use and Abuse of Wood in House Construction that talked about screened vents, and in January of 1942, the Federal Housing Administration published Property Standards and Minimum Construction Requirements for Dwellings. That document contains the first crawlspace ventilation requirement in American regulatory literature. 1 square foot of vent for every 150 square feet of floor. 1 to 150. That's the number that's been in your building code your whole life. That's the number the appraiser checks. That number is 84 years old, and it predates any known research on how crawl spaces actually perform. They weren't lying to anybody. They were guessing, in 1942, with the best thinking they had, and they wrote the guess down. Then everyone copied it for 3 generations. 2 words, and then you'll never look at a foundation vent the same way. The first is dew point. Dew point is the temperature at which air has to give up its water. Cool a body of air down to its dew point, and the water comes out of it, onto whatever's cold. You already know this one. It's the glass of iced tea on the porch rail in July. Nobody poured water on the outside of that glass. The glass is cold, the air around it is wet, and the air let go. The second is ground-coupled temperature. That means a surface whose temperature is set by the dirt it's sitting against, not by the weather. Deep soil in southern Missouri stays near the yearly average, somewhere in the 50s. So the block walls, the piers, and the dirt floor of your crawl space hold it roughly 55 to 65 degrees all summer long, no matter what the porch thermometer says. Now put those together. In July and August in Missouri, the dew point regularly runs 68 degrees and up. Some days it's 75. That air comes through your vent at 92 degrees, moves across a floor joist sitting at 62, and it has no choice. It lets go. Your ductwork makes it worse. That metal is carrying 55-degree air. It is the coldest object under your house, and it's the biggest. It's a glass of iced tea 11 feet long. Your house is sweating from the inside, and the condensation season here runs 120 to 140 days a year. That's 4.5 months of water, every year, since the day the house was built. If you've been under your own house and seen this, water beading on the ductwork, black on the joists, insulation on the ground, tell me in the comments what you found and what county you're in. I want to know how far north this goes. I've only got my own boots and 11 houses. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you a man in an office decided to hide this from you. That's not what happened, and I don't need it to be. What happened is worse because there's nobody to be mad at. A guess got written into a federal standard in 1942. The standard got copied into the model codes. The model codes got adopted by every state. Mortgage inspectors were trained to check for the vents. Appraisers were trained to check for the vents. Builders got told, put in the vents or you don't get your certificate of occupancy. And every one of those people was doing their job correctly. Then the moisture showed up, the way it always does. And an industry grew up around cleaning up after it. Mold remediation, joist sistering, subfloor replacement, crawl space encapsulation. Look at what that last one costs today. Professional crawl space encapsulation runs $3 to $10 a square foot. Common quotes for a 1,500 square foot house land around $5,500 to $8,000. The vent sealing portion alone gets billed at $150 to $450. I'm not saying those contractors are crooks. Most of them do good work, and the good ones earn every dollar. What I'm saying is this: you are paying $5,000 to undo a rule that was invented in 1942 by people who had never measured a crawl space. Nobody's hiding it. It's in the code book, in public, in a section most homeowners have never been told exists. Inertia costs you more than a conspiracy ever would. A conspiracy has somebody in it who could change his mind. Here's the part almost nobody hears. Starting in 2001, a nonprofit called Advanced Energy, out of Raleigh, North Carolina, ran a multi-year field study on 12 houses in central North Carolina. Real, occupied houses. Sealed crawl spaces against vented ones, instrumented and measured over years, not weekends. The closed crawl spaces were drier, substantially less mold, and where the heating and cooling equipment was down in that space, they measured energy savings. Figures published in the range of 15 to 18% on heating and cooling. In December of 2004, the North Carolina Building Code Council changed the state code on the strength of that work. And the model code changed too. Open the International Residential Code to section R408.3, unvented crawl space. It says your ventilation openings are not required, so long as you do two things. First, the exposed dirt has to be covered with a continuous Class 1 vapor retarder. That's sheet material rated to stop water vapor, permeance of 1/10 of a perm or less, which is what ordinary heavy poly sheeting does. Seams overlapped 6 inches and taped. Edges run at least 6 inches up the foundation wall and sealed to it. Second, you pick one of 4 ways to handle the air. A continuously running exhaust fan moving 1 cubic foot per minute for every 50 square feet of floor. Or a supply of conditioned air from your HVAC at the same rate. Or a dehumidifier. Or treat the space as a supply plenum. That's not folk wisdom. That's your building code, printed, numbered, and legal in most of this country right now. Names and prices, so nobody can sell you fog. The meter. A digital hygrometer, a thermometer that also reads relative humidity. $12 to $25 at any hardware store, farm store, or Walmart. Get one that shows a high-low memory, so it records the worst of the day while you're up top asleep. The ground cover. 6 mil polyethylene sheeting is the code minimum and runs about 5 to 15 cents a square foot. It's cheap and it tears under your knees. What you actually want is 10 mil or heavier reinforced liner. Figure 15 to 50 cents a square foot. A 10 mil roll 10 feet by 100 feet. 1,000 square feet of coverage. Runs around $180. Seam tape, made for poly, about $30 a roll. Foundation pins to hold the liner to the block, roughly $23 for 100. Rigid foam board and a tube of sealant for the vent openings, $20 to $30. A dehumidifier if you need one. $300 for a decent residential unit, up to $1,300 for a dedicated crawlspace machine with a condensate pump. DIY materials for 1,000 square foot crawlspace, $250 to $500, plus one miserable Saturday. The sequence matters more than the materials. 1. Measure first. Meter goes in, 48 hours, before you buy anything else. 2. Fix liquid water before vapor. Gutters extended 6 feet from the foundation, grade sloping away. Any plumbing drip found and fixed. Poly over standing water just makes a covered puddle. 3. Ground cover down. Every square foot of dirt. 6 inches of overlap at every seam, taped. 6 inches up the wall, pinned and sealed. Cut around piers and taped to them. 4. Then the vents, and only then. 5. Dry the air. Dehumidifier on a humidistat or conditioned supply per that code section. 6. Meter stays down there. Forever. You check it in August like you check the oil. Sealing vents without a ground cover. Worst thing you can do. Now you've trapped soil moisture with nowhere to go. Partial coverage. Bare dirt in the corner behind the ductwork evaporates just fine. Cover all of it. Untaped seams. Loose sheets are decoration. Insulating the floor above instead of the walls. Fiberglass in the joist bays soaks and falls. That's how you got here. Skipping the combustion check. If there's an atmospherically vented gas furnace or water heater inside that crawlspace, one that draws its air from the space and vents up a flue, do not seal that space until a licensed HVAC tech looks at it. Starving a gas appliance of air is how carbon monoxide gets into a house. That one can kill you. Get it checked. Skipping radon. Sealing changes how air moves under your floor. Test before and after. Most state health departments, Missouri's included, run a radon program with low-cost kits. And don't sign a $5,000 contract in the first week of August because a man in a truck showed you a photo of mold. Measure first. The meter costs $15. One thing, not 10. Here it is. Saturday morning, before it gets hot, drive to the hardware store and buy a digital hygrometer with a high-low memory. $12 to $25. It'll be on a peg near the thermometers. Take it under the house. Do not set it on the dirt and do not hang it in front of a vent. Set it on a block or hang it off a joist near the middle of the space, about a foot below the subfloor. 20 minutes, start to finish, including finding the flashlight. Leave it 48 hours. Then go back and read the high number. Under 60%, you're fine. Leave your house alone and go fishing. 60 to 70, you've got vapor coming out of the dirt. Ground cover this fall. $250 and a Saturday. Over 70, sitting there day after day, and your joists are heading for trouble. Wood settles toward whatever the air around it holds. That's called equilibrium moisture content. Healthy framing under a house runs 10 to 16%. Above 20, mold has what it needs. Any farmer in this county already understands this in his hands. Bale hay a few points too wet and stack it in the barn, and it heats and it molds. And by February, it's gray dust. Same water, same math. Only the barn is your floor, and the winter is 30 years long. Write the date and the reading on a joist in pencil. Check it again next August. Now you're not guessing, and neither is the man quoting you a price. Next week, I'm going to show you the rim joist. That's 6 inches of framing where your floor meets your outside wall. It leaks more heat than every window in your house combined, and it costs about $40 to fix. Most people have never heard the word. I got under my own house in the spring of 2011 with a borrowed meter, expecting to prove a neighbor wrong. 81%. My wife's grandfather framed that house in 1954, and it had been drinking out of the ground for 57 years while 3 generations of us walked around on top of it, wondering why the doors stuck. The water was never coming through the roof. It was coming up out of the dirt, and it had been coming up the whole time. Go put a number on it.